Greetings, dear students. Today I am going to introduce Chaucer, who is considered as father of English literature. This title was given by Dryden, and it is apt to say Chaucer as father of English literature or poetry. Old English period is divided into Anglo-Saxon literary period, which is roughly 650 to 1066, and the next period, which is Anglo-Norman conquest to Chaucer, it roughly covers from 1066 to 1350. Now, from Chaucer to the Renaissance, this period roughly covers from 1350 to 1560. Now we are considering Chaucer. He was born in 1340. His birth is shrouded in mystery. That's why you see many places in the books that 1340 and there is a question mark there. Chaucer. He was a son of John Chaucer. His father was a businessman and he had a small estate at Ipswich. And he was occasionally employed on service of king, and this king was Edward III. And due to this acquaintance with king, Chaucer was appointed as page. Page is like a servant, and he was appointed page in 1357. So he was born in 1340, and at the age of 17 he was appointed as a page to Lady Elizabeth, wife of Lionel. He was Duke of Clarence, and in 1359 Chaucer was sent to a war, and this war was with France, and where he was made prisoner of war. And when he was made prisoner of war, he was obviously rescued by the state, and in 1360 he was ransomed. In 1367 he was made valet of the king's chamber. Now, this valet of the king's chamber, this gave Chaucer some time also, and in 1369 he wrote a remarkable poem, and this poem was on the death of Blanche, wife of John of Gaunt, and the poem name was The Death of Blanche the Duchess. And in this year he also began to bore arms in France, and during the next 2 years he was frequently employed on diplomatic missions. In this part of the video I am focusing on here some important years which are marked a turning point in Chaucer's life. In 1370 he was sent to Genoa to settle a commercial treaty, on which occasion he might have met Petrarch, and meeting with Petrarch was one of the turning point in the literary career of Chaucer. In 1374, he got from the Corporation of London a lease for life of a house at Aldgate. And soon after, he was appointed Comptroller of the Customs and subsidy of oilskins and leather in the Port of London. And in 1377, he was sent on a mission to Flanders. These years are very important in the literary career of Chaucer also, because these visits had shaped the Chaucer, the poet. And in the visit to Flanders, he was sent to make peace with the French king. And on the accession of Richard II, he was sent to France to arrange the marriage of the king with French Princess Mary. In 1382, he became controller of the petty customs of Port of London, and in 1385, he was allowed to appoint a deputy to himself. And this deputy helped him to give some time to his poetic skills. And in 1373, when these things were happening, in parallel to this, in 1373, he started his masterpiece, the Canterbury Tale. This is the one of the major work by Chaucer. In 1380, he was made Knight of the Shire for Kent. He was elected for this post. His fortune suffered some eclipse when his patron John of Gaunt was abroad and his brother Gloucester exercised supreme power in the state. He was dismissed from his employment, leaving him no income beyond his pension. However, when Richard took the government into his own hands, his friends were in power again and he was appointed clerk of the king's works. The office he held for 2 years, after which he received a pension of $20 from the king. On the accession of Henry IV in 1399, Henry IV, he got an additional pension of $40 was granted to him. In the same year, he took a lease of a house at Westminster, where he died on October 25, 1400. Now, this was the sum of his career. Focus on Chaucer's literary career. His literary career is divided into 3 parts, and these parts are roughly divided on the basis of influence on Chaucer. The first period is known as French period. The second one, Italian period. And third period is English period. In the previous part of this video, I have told you about the visits of Chaucer, and during these visits, he got influences from the country he visited. The French period, it covers Chaucer initial days when he was a poet of love in the manner of French poets. And the major poetic creation which he has done in this period is Roman de la Rose, and these are the translation of French poem into English. And it is an elaborate allegory. This is an allegorical poem. This is the allegory, and it is a dream setting of love. And a rose grows in a mystic garden protected by a symbolic power. Chaucer carried on these and other conventions. During this period, he wrote also some ballads, roundels, and other intricate French lyrical form. And I have discussed about this in 1369, the poem which he wrote on the death of Duchess. This was also influenced by French poetry. The death of Blanche. Now, in modern English, we write the spelling of death like this, but due to the French influence, the spelling was this: the death of Blanche. And Blanche spelling is also different: Blaunche. The death of Blanche, the Duchess. One thing has to be kept in the mind while we see the works of Chaucer, that these English writing is not as same as the modern English as we see. Consider Italian period. In 1372, Chaucer experienced a turning point in his poetical career. He readily imbibed the new spirit, the humanism of the new learning. And this is humanism of new learning is also, we can say, he imbibed the Renaissance. And at this time, Renaissance was actually flourishing. And before the Renaissance has actually reached the shores of England, Chaucer brought the impact of the new intellectual forces into his poetry. And this is a really remarkable thing in the Chaucer's poetry. And it was a reorientation of the medieval outlook. He gave reorientation of medieval. Medieval culture. Now, this reorientation of medieval culture and scholastic learning. In fact, he reinterprets medieval culture in the light of Renaissance, and it is a great achievement of the poet of that time. To the Italian period belongs some works which are the important works belonging to Italian period is House of Fame, The Parliament of Fowls, Troilus and Cresside, and The Legend of Good Women. Now, these works are very important when we consider Chaucer as a poet. When we see this particular work, Troilus and Cresside, in this work, Chaucer goes straight to Boccaccio. Boccaccio was one of the famous poet of the Italian period of that time. And in these works of poem, he has set against the convention of courtly love. Chaucer breathes a new spirit and significance into it, far transcending the scope of original. And in the Legend of Good Women, he adapted from Latin work of Boccaccio. And the adaptation where he brought the adaptation, the name was De Claris Mulliberus. Uh, Sorry for the pronunciation of these works. These are Latin works of Boccaccio, and there was a long prologue to the poems, and which is very interesting. And in this poem, the May Day is sitting here. I'm talking about the Legend of Good Woman, and in this, there is a May Day, and which is sitting there, which is taken from the Romantic Rose. But Chaucer seems to react against the creed of courtly love, and he set against the voice against the convention of courtly love, and it was mildly satirized, and it was also satirized in Troilus and Cresside, and the same thing happened in the Legend of Good Women. When we talk about the Legend of Good Women, this is the work in which he has used the prologue, and the prologue to the Legend of Good Women reads like a definite recantation. It is called recantation. We might well believe that Chaucer gradually rid himself of the influence of French school. He was beginning to strike but an independent line for himself. In the House of Fame as well as in the Legend of Good Women, Chaucer undertook the task of constructing a work which would constitute a setting for a group of tales. But he left both unfinished. He began to turn to more serious work, and these serious work we find in English period. Now, in English period, we see these influences are there, but they are subsidized. And the French, from the French poets, from the Italian poets, he had learned so much, and he has imbibed all these learnings. And now comes the real Chaucer. The major work of this English period is Canterbury Tales. Canterbury Tales is the greatest work of his, and it is a collection of stories, both secular and sacred. And it has been numerous and popular stories which were popular in Middle Ages. The Renaissance inherited the taste for them. While enlarging their scope and humanizing their content, Chaucer borrowed the idea of Canterbury Tales. Again, he was influenced from Boccaccio, but there was originality in this. He has indebted from these masters of Italian and French poetry, but now Chaucer has blossomed as an original poet. For Canterbury Tales, he has taken his inspiration from Boccaccio Decameron. The work which was the major influence for this was Decameron. And again, this was the work of Boccaccio. But here was a difference, that the storytelling and the content and the style all was Chaucer's original. Now, what is the story of Decameron? In this story of the poem, Boccaccio has taken a company of aristocratic young people who represented as having taken refuge from the plague raging in Florence, as now we are suffering from the global pandemic of COVID-19. Similarly, in this story, the young men have taken refuge from the plague which was raging in Florence, and they have taken refuge in a villa on the slopes of Fussel. They wandered through the valleys of oleanders and myrtles, or sat behind beside the fountains of the villa garden and beguile their time with tales of sentiment and intrigue. Another Italian, Sir had pictured a pilgrimage composed of many classes of people presided over by a leader of governor. Now again, I will put the name of another Italian poet. His name is Sir. Now this poet has also pictured a pilgrimage, and there in this pilgrimage there was a class of many people, and these people were presided over by a leader or governor and entertained on their journey with tales narrated by an official storyteller who is Sir himself. Now Chaucer adopts a similar framework in Canterbury Tales. There are a group of pilgrimage, and in this masterpiece of Chaucer we see amalgamation of these two poetry.